Welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Authority podcast. I am your host, Kevin Steele. We are happy to join you this week for the glorious championship week. We are finally here. This is the last hurrah for, except for you weirdos who play week 17, which I don't know why you would ever think about doing that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, just don't do it. But anyways, and I am joined once again, as always, by my co-host, hashtag HedgeLife, Cody Kutzer. You can find him on Twitter at CKutzerFF. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyRad13. How are you doing this night on this wonderful December night?
Doing really well, man. Had a really nice week. I will be in 6 or 7 ships coming up, so one of them being the Scott Fish Bowl. I made it to the finals there, so it's gonna be a long week of second guessing myself and tinkering and hair pulling. So looking forward to it, man. How was your week?
It was pretty good. So ready for some DFS this weekend. We got the glorious 3-game slate on Saturday. It's like a Thanksgiving slate all over again. For us on Saturday with some great games. And then we also have the Sunday slate. So it should be good times this weekend with DFS. So that's what I'll be looking at. So anyways, week 16 wasn't as bad, or week 15, excuse me, wasn't as bad in terms of injury wise, but we did have a couple. So let's get into the news and notes here, shall we? So let's start off with the running backs. Dalvin Cook and Josh Jacobs are questionable this week with shoulder injuries. Both of them seem highly questionable. I don't know why you'd play Josh Jacobs. The Raiders are out of it. They're done. They're cooked. I guess there's some like crazy scenario, I think, where they possibly could get in, but it's not going to happen. Their season's over with. And then you have Dalvin Cook, who, again, they've clinched the playoffs, I believe, and I don't think, what are you running him out there for? I don't think that I would play him. I know Dr. Chow said that they'd be surprised. He'd be surprised if the Vikings played him this week. So I do believe they play Monday night. So that's the problem there. So what would you do if you are a Dalvin Cook owner? Would you be running out to snap up Alexander Mattison, who's also questionable, or would you take a shot on Mike Boone?
Well, hopefully at this point, if you have Dalvin Cook, you've had Alexander Mattison rostered for a while now. And then even going back to a few weeks ago when we thought we saw the last of Dalvin Cook. So hopefully you already have Mattison. If you don't have him, someone in your league probably does. But if for some odd reason they're both available, I think I would just take the safe way and just take Mike Boone at this point, just with Mattison. You know what I mean? With him being questionable as well with that ankle injury. Although last week there was a quote from Mattison saying that he would be good to go for Sunday. So maybe he's closer than what we think. But man, it kind of sucks that we don't have any definitive news as of right now in terms of what Madison's doing. The safe play would just to pick up Mike Boone, but like I said, you should have already had Alexander Mattison rostered at this point. So if you don't have him, that's your own fault, and it treats you right.
Serves you right, damn it. The other one I think is more intriguing. I guess at least we know the clear path now would be DeAndre Washington if Josh Jacobs does not play. Again, they said he was very sore after the game. He could barely lift his arm up. I just can't imagine they run him out there. But you never know. It's the Raiders and what they're going to do. But DeAndre Washington, the last time he got an opportunity, he was heavily targeted as a pass catcher as well. So, for me, like if Josh Jacobs is out, I have DeAndre Washington right now, right outside of a RB1. So I'm at RB16, so I guess a little bit further out than that, but about middle of the road RB2 going against the Chargers. I like that matchup. So if he's playing, or if this ends up happening and Josh Jacobs does not play, which is what I'm thinking is going to happen, DeAndre Washington is a slam dunk pickup.
Yeah, but the weird thing with the Dalvin Cook injury is I was looking today, and apparently Mike Zimmer came out and said that, like, if they needed him to, he could have played, and that he should have gotten a couple more touches during that game. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing this for? Just sit him if you know what I mean. Like, even in that game, like the the Chargers are a decent team, but like I don't think that was a case where it was like, all right, man, like we really need Dalvin Cook to go out there and potentially get banged up and lose him for the year. So let's make sure we get this W. Just such a weird scenario, and then that puts puts fantasy owners in a corner because, like you said, it's a Monday night game first of all, so that sucks. And then it could be one of those things where he comes in, he gets 3-4 touches, and then they pull the plug on it. So that's going to be a tough decision for fantasy owners in their championship week.
Yeah, man, and I get the understanding, I guess, that they can still win the division and stuff like that. But why? Who cares? Like, just like you're better off with Dalvin Cook than not with Dalvin Cook, obviously. So why run him out there and get him hurt even more, or cause a bigger issue where it requires you to shut him down for, I think, 4 to 6 weeks or whatever it is. I think if it became worse, like that's insane. So sit the guy, let him rest, and bring him back, for the playoffs, because there's no reason to. I mean, Alexander Mattison is more than capable. We've seen it this year with him. Any opportunities he's gotten. So there's no reason to run him out there.
No, and then you add on the fact that Cook has had a history of shoulder injuries. I think he already had 3 surgeries before he even got into the league. So I don't get it. I don't get a lot of these things that NFL coaches and franchises do, but here we are.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think, like we said, I think with this one, we are going to want to, I think if I had to put a waiver priority on it, if we get more news and more clarification that Dalvin Cook is indeed going to be out this week, and we find out that Alexander Mattison is going to play, he would be the number one guy I would want in this scenario. But since I don't think we're going to get that news, I think it would be DeAndre Washington for me. I think we'll have a more clear-cut idea of what's going on with Josh Jacobs by that time. And I would want a waiver claim in on DeAndre Washington in this matchup against the Chargers. All right, so we can move on from there. Another one, I guess, a running back. We could Kerryon Johnson. He's continuing to practice. They've kind of talked him up a little bit. I guess he still has a shot at returning this week. We'll have to see what happens. I don't think they've shut that down, have they yet?
I don't think so. I mean, they were talking about it, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, that he was practicing and he was designated IR to return. But I mean, if he does, don't add him. And if you for some reason had him stashed on your bench and like maybe your league has an IR spot for your redraft leagues, don't play him on the road to Denver. Like, if you made it this whole time without Kerryon, do not play him week 16, coming off of probably 8 to 10 weeks, depending on I can't remember how those IR rules work and how long he has to be on IR before he can come back. But regardless, that's a lengthy absence, and it's not he's not going up against Carolina where you could foresee him going, 8 touches for 90 yards and a touchdown or something like that. So just completely stay away from that backfield in general, but especially Kerryon.
Yeah, I mean, just reading some of the news, sounds like he hasn't had any setbacks. Sounds like I think there's a real chance that he plays. I think the guys, Matt Patricia probably feels like he's a little bit on the hot seat and wants to try to get some wins, and that's why they would roll him out. It's the only thing I can fathom as to why they would do it. But I guess if he does play, like I don't know. I guess it would really depend on your situation, and if you were a Dalvin Cook owner and maybe Alexander Mattison was already added, and then maybe someone else picks up Boone ahead of you, or something like that, or it depends on the different scenarios that could possibly be at hand, and then maybe you might need a running back. So, and if you were desperate and you absolutely had to have a running back, like I wouldn't hate having Kerryon Johnson. And I guess, but you'd have to be pretty desperate at this point. And I would think about, week 16, you're in the championship. I wouldn't think you would need him, but you never know. It depends on your situation and kind of how things roll. So I don't hate it, because I do think that he's not going to be he's not going to go out there and get 70% of the touches. It's just not going to happen. But I could see him getting, 8 to 10 carries and maybe, 5 to 6 targets, something like that. But it's still not a great matchup against I believe they're playing the Broncos. And not to mention that David Blau is horrific.
That has indeed been verified.
That is the case. So, in other news that is a little more upsetting, We lost a true gem this week. Christopher Godwin will likely miss the rest of the season with a hamstring injury. We really have to kind of go back to, the start of the season, right, with him, that we all look back on him, and he was a player that we were all very high on here at the TFA. And, it's a lot of people, it was one of the most highly debatable things that we had over the offseason was Chris Godwin. A lot of people thought that there are people that thought Mike Williams was a better play and a much better value than what Chris Godwin's going too high. Chris Godwin is not going to be that good. He's the number 2 receiver behind Mike Evans. And then there's OJ Howard there. Well, as we know, Christopher Godwin went out and slayed this season. He is right now the wide receiver 2 in PPR formats, 1,333 yards and 9 touchdowns. Chris Godwin went out and gave us everything that he had on a weekly basis. He paid off his draft value tremendously. Chris, you will always be in our hearts. We will never forget you. And until 2020, we will see you again, our sweet baby angel, Chris Godwin. Now, I would like to take a moment of silence. Cody, do you have anything to put in on this?
That was just so beautifully well spoken that I'm a little choked up right now, and I really don't think there's anything left to add. So I'm gonna need a minute.
I promised myself I wouldn't cry.
Getting a little dusty in here.
So, Chris Godwin, we will always remember you and your glorious 2019 season. Until next year, when I have you ranked as a top 3 wideout, let's get it. Okay, so with that, we got that part out of the way. We didn't want to do it, but we had to. Chris Godwin is the man. And anyways, so let's go on to some lighter news. Will Grier is going to get his opportunity to start this season. He is now taking over for Kyle Allen. And it doesn't seem like it was that long ago when all the people on Twitter were talking about Kyle Allen as the next franchise quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. And that didn't last very long because Kyle Allen has been confirmed bad and confirmed awful.
Yeah, he has something, like 6 picks and 5 fumbles just over like the last 2 or 3 games, something like that. Like, it's just so wild how people get so obsessed with like the backup quarterback narrative. Like, that's something that's always been like really strong in Pittsburgh, but then like, you see it a lot of times now with, across the Twitterverse. He picked up 2 or 3 wins and it was like, all right, that's it. There's no way Cam's going to be back, and Kyle Allen, fire him up. He is it for the rest of the season. And then reality sets in. They start losing games, and now we're seeing Will Grier, which I feel like it's kind of odd that it's taken this long to see him, but we are here now, and it's apparently Will Grier's season. And I know you do a lot of preseason DFS. He wasn't very good in the preseason, correct?
No. Showed a few flashes, but I think this is a smart move by them. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to the playoffs, obviously. So it's a smart move to give him some reps and see what they have in him, because obviously Kyle Allen's not the answer. And so it'll be interesting to see what the Panthers do over the offseason. Like, that's something that we'll be talking about over the coming months as we do podcasts here. Because I think with this situation, like, they have a nice core, right? You have David, obviously Christian McCaffrey. Then you have DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Ian Thomas looks like he might be, the real jokes. I think this is probably Greg Olson's last year. So, they have the pieces there. So I don't know if they go with a rookie quarterback. Is this something that they're going to try to trade up for and grab one of these rookie quarterbacks? Or do they go out and, acquire, another, different quarterback like a Nick Foles or an Andy Dalton. But, I don't know. I guess you could make a case that, is that an upgrade over Cam Newton? Because there's already been many reports that the Panthers are going to be aggressively looking to trade Cam Newton. And so I don't know. I don't know if whatever's out there is better than him. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting offseason to see what happens because there's going to be a lot of different quarterbacks that are on the move.
Yeah, I really don't know what they're gonna do either. They're not gonna be in the position in the draft to have one follow them. So if they're gonna go that route, they're gonna need to trade up. Like, do they try and bring in a free agent? Like it's or they could just I don't know stick with Cam Newton, who's been in that system and obviously knows it and has been like you said that core, the nucleus of that team. Even if you only have 75% of what Cam used to be, like you got to figure that's better than whatever they're going to get, like unless they get aggressive in the draft. So that's it's definitely going to be one. It's going to be super interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because I mean, as of right now, you basically have L.A., the Chargers, who are likely going to be looking for a quarterback. Possibly, I don't know. Maybe they roll Phillip Rivers out there again for another season. Then you have the Raiders, who, by all accounts, does not sound like they're sold on Derek Carr. And so, but they're a team that probably could package some stuff and move up in the draft. Or I think they have a couple of picks as well that they can kind of do something with if they wanted to move up and grab a quarterback. Or I guess they could also make a trade for somebody or pick up a couple of these other quarterbacks that will be available. Andy Dalton likely out in Cincinnati. You have Nick Foles, who's definitely going to be available from the Jaguars, which is crazy because that's going to be a tough sell for anybody to pick up that contract as bad as he looked with them. So, finding a team that's going to take that on is going to be tough. So I'm sure there's a couple other ones I'm not thinking of. I think there's a possibility that we could see Drew Brees retire after this season. I feel like if they were to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, I think you could almost bet that Drew Brees retires after this year. Because what else does he have to prove? He's not a guy that's talked about playing till he's 45, like Tom Brady has, or anything like that. Obviously, he's still playing at a very high level, but it could be one of these moves where you go out on top. So, if they were able to win the Super Bowl this year, I think Drew Brees could be gone. I know people think that maybe Teddy Bridgewater could be. He went 4-0 there and for the Saints, but I just can't see it. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is as good as people think.
Now, we've talked about Teddy before, and he's one of those guys I've always rooted for. I feel like he's like with his injury and everything, and he's just someone I've always just liked. But he's never been a great quarterback by any means. But in terms of teams, Miami, I'm not sure if you mentioned them or not. Washington, the Redskins obviously aren't going to do it, but Dwayne Haskins hasn't really looked like he's the answer either. So that's another situation to monitor. I think that more or less wraps it up. With Trubisky, maybe in Chicago, maybe we see something done there. I think that'd be super intriguing for Cam to end up in Chicago. I think that'd be a really nice fit there, especially for fantasy purposes.
I think one that we really honestly could see is Tom Brady. I honestly think there's a chance that Tom Brady's not playing for the New England Patriots next year. And as crazy as that sounds, but his contract voids after this year. They cannot franchise tag him, so they have to sign him. Now, some of this could be the way that he worked his contract this way is they want to see what the Patriots are going to do. Are they going to actually bring in offensive talent and surround him with, not this bag of, this bag of nothing that they got right now with Julian Edelman and kind of that's it. But so I think it's going to be an interesting spot, but he could leave. I think that is in the realm of possibility. And Chicago is a place that I always thought would be very interesting because that team has a ton of talent. You have Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, who has really come on lately. They probably could use a tight end. I don't think Trey Burton's the answer there, but overall, I think that's a really great spot. And so I don't know. I think Tom Brady's also in New England could be another spot looking for a quarterback.
Yeah, that's one that's been rumored for a little bit, and I think there was a report that just came out recently. I can't remember who had it and where it had him going, but it was kind of talked about as if hey, he's probably not going to be there, and this is where I'm expecting him to go. I can't remember what team it was, but inside information. My boy's wedding that I was in, he had his buddy come down from Boston, and apparently Tom Brady's house has been on the market for quite some time. So that's been all the hubbub up in that area. So might be
I've heard that. I think the people talk about that, but then other people are like, well, this is a great time to sell, and that's probably what he's doing. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to find out here in a couple of months because free agency is like, what, 3 months away? Something like that. I mean, really, that's all it is. I mean, so it's not that far. So anyways, let's Josh Twinter. What's up, guys? Championship time.
Sure.
Need a flex. Singletary, Bell, Chark if he plays, or if I get either of these on waivers, Perriman or Mike Boone, standard scoring.
Ooh, standard. That throws a bit of a wrench into it. I think I like Perriman out of that group, to be honest. I mean, if Chark plays, I'd roll Chark, but I mean, that's not a good matchup for Singletary going up against New England. Not a good matchup for Bell going up against Pittsburgh. I mean, that Jets offense in general just has been super up and down. I think out of them, you look at Perriman, and like we were talking about before we jumped on and started to record, we were talking about Winston and just his gunslinger mentality. So Perriman, I think out of that group, probably has the best chance at scoring a touchdown. So in standard scoring, that's kind of what I'd be looking at. So I think I'm going to roll Perriman out of that group.
Yeah, I probably agree. And actually, shout out to you last week. I know you were actually rather high on the Rashad Perriman bandwagon, as I was more on the Justin Watson, where I believe Justin Watson had 1 reception for 5 yards. So not good. But I will say this week, it's going to be hard to imagine that Justin Watson doesn't get an opportunity. Scotty Miller was also placed on IR. We know no Godwin, RIP. Mike Evans is out. I mean, who are they throwing the ball to, right? So you have Rashad Perriman, and I think, Justin Watson is definitely in play, and especially now with no Scotty Miller. And then I think O.J. Howard, for the first time all year, really, really looks like a great play this week as well. So I have to agree. It's tough because with Chark, he's been such a monster this year. It's hard not to want to play him, but I mean, he is coming out of a walking boot. I guess you say he's going to be okay, but again, I mean, this is a guy who could go out there and play the first quarter and re-injure himself, and there's no reason for them to run him out. The Jaguars are toast anyway. So while this is a pretty decent matchup for Chark, like I think I would just have to lean Perriman just because I think there's an opportunity where he sees 8 to 10 targets at least.
Yeah, there was a blurb that just came out a couple hours ago with Arians saying that they were going to, quote, have to get the running backs more involved because of the injuries they have. I mean, Ogunbowale has been their preferred pass catcher the entire year. I don't see them forcing him in. I mean, Rojo has splashed here and there. Peyton Barber is a Jag. He's nothing that excites me. So I think we see a lot of volume go toward both tight ends. Maybe this is a week where we see kind of like a Philadelphia Eagles type of scheme where it's a lot of 2 tight end sets and Braid and Howard are both involved. But I think Howard led the team in targets last week, if I'm recalling correctly, but it was Braid that I think Braid had 4 for 40 and a touchdown. So I think that's a case where Perriman gets the most volume, and then both of the tight ends are also in play.
No, I agree. I think I agree with that. So I think this is a week if you were desperate at a wide receiver and you needed one. I think, Perriman would definitely be up there, but Justin Watson is also super interesting for people that are in really deep leagues. So anyways, we got another one from Ryan Gorman. Perriman, Miller, A.J. Brown, Cup, start 2, full PPR.
So the Titans have the Saints. We already talked about Perriman. Anthony Miller has KC, and who do the Rams play? Do you know?
I believe they play the 49ers, right? I'm almost positive. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the Saturday night game.
Oh, yeah, Jesus. I don't know why I wasn't saying that. Yeah, you're right. Niners. So give me Anthony Miller for sure. I know KC has been strong I wrote about this, shameless plug, in the streamer article that I put out today on the Fantasy Authority. KC KC's strength in their secondary has been on the perimeter, and Anthony Miller, who he's been like the wide receiver 7 over the past 3 weeks, plays over 76% of his snaps from the slot. So I don't think that's, he's gonna avoid the strength of that secondary. Man, it's so hard to sit AJ Brown right now with the heater that he's been on. Like I said, Miller for sure, and then for me it'd be between AJ Brown and Perriman. Do you have a stronger take on the other one? I'm assuming you're going Anthony Miller as well for one of yours. Maybe not.
Well, one, I think it's tough to sit. I mean, Cooper Kupp, obviously, because of his upside and his massive ceiling that he carries. So, honestly, I would probably lean. I'd probably go AJ Brown and Kupp.
You're not going Anthony Miller at all?
Which is, well, see, it's tough because right now my rankings I have that you can also find on thefantasywarrior.com. I have Brashad Perriman at 19. So I guess I'm contradicting myself a little bit. And I have AJ Brown at 20, and then I have 21. So it's kind of like splitting hairs here a little bit.
Where do you have Anthony Miller?
26.
Okay.
So yeah. My thing with San Francisco is how banged up they are too. And I don't know what fucking Rams team is going to show up, to be honest with you. Last week against Dallas, I mean, they got, destroyed. And then the week before that, they lay the wood to the Seahawks. So I don't know. I guess, I mean, you're looking to win, right? I mean, you're looking to chip this thing and take the whole fucking thing down. And not so I still don't see how you sit Cooper Kupp, though, especially in full PPR. So I would probably go AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp. If you want to lean a little bit more upside, I would go Brashad Perriman and AJ Brown.
Yeah, I gotta play Anthony Miller. So we're gonna differ on this one a little bit. So I'll go Anthony Miller and AJ Brown. I mean, Kupp just hasn't been as involved as he. Over the last several weeks, his usage has been down a little bit. He only has. So over the last 3 weeks, he only has 16 catches for 151 yards, but he does have the 3 touchdowns to go with that, which is obviously bumping up his fantasy production. He's averaging 13.7 points per game over those last 3 weeks in half PPR scoring. It's like I said, it's so hard to sit AJ Brown with the heater that he's been on. He is actually the wide receiver 1 over the last 3 weeks. 6 catches, 312 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So I'm gonna roll AJ Brown and Anthony Miller, and I know that we just did not help you at all.
The thing I will say this to talk it through a little bit with AJ Brown, the thing that concerns me is that just the matchup. I think
it's not a great matchup.
No, I mean not at all. And you're gonna see Marshawn Lattimore plastered all over him, and I wouldn't be surprised if they put a safety over the top and try to take away, because who else do they have past him, right? And I think now he's probably got enough attention on people. That's what worries me about him, is that this is one of the worst matchups he could have, especially with the secondary. Now they've boosted their secondary with Janoris Jenkins, and with the addition of him, I don't know how many snaps he'll play or what they're going to do with him, with this being his first week here in New Orleans, but yeah, I think this is also, I don't know. So this is a tough one. But yeah, I'm sticking to it though. I'm gonna go Cooper Kupp and AJ Brown. But like I said, if you're wanting if it's looking like this is a matchup for you where you are not on the good end of winning, because like there's teams that slip into the playoffs that maybe in the matchup you're facing where the guy's maybe loaded and has it's not looking good. I would shoot straight for upside, and I would fire in Brashad Perriman for sure.
The thing that sucks about that is they are the first Saturday game. They're Saturday at 1:00, so that's a decision you're going to have to make very early on. You're not going to have the what's the fucking word I'm looking for? the good fortune of knowing whether or not you're behind, you know what I mean, come like Sunday night or something like that. So
yeah, with Perriman, you're gonna have to make that decision because they play obviously that Saturday afternoon game. There's no Thursday night. They play the Saturday at noon game. So, if you want to roll the dice, I think Brashad Perriman is probably it, and I would probably look to sit AJ Brown would be the first one I went to, and I would start Cooper Kupp. Just because Cooper Kupp, I mean, he's going to see the opportunities. I know that he hasn't been as involved in the offense. He played 92% of the snaps last week, received 6 targets. He had the 6 for 41, did have a touchdown. And then the week before, there was the sort of the odd week where he only played 34% of the snaps. Only saw 4 targets in that game, but again, scored a touchdown. And the week before that against Arizona, he played 73% of the snaps. Again, 6 targets. I mean, you have to go back to week 12, whenever he got 10 targets against Baltimore. So, but we've seen little runs like this before. But you go back to week 10 and 11, where he only saw 4 and 3. So, I don't know. I just find it really difficult to even imagine sitting Cooper Kupp with his upside and ceiling. I mean, he's likely one of the players that got you here. So. Anyways, thank you for the question there. Again, this was one of the tougher questions we'll probably get all night, because I think they're all kind of right there where you could just kind of make a case, which is crazy with Cooper Kupp. You wouldn't have thought earlier in the year that would be all that close with him, but it has been lately. But him finding the finding the end zone has really saved his bacon a little bit. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into it. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we would appreciate if anybody hits that thumbs up button. Helps us out tremendously, and a subscribe would be appreciated. So let's go ahead and jump into the Week 16 top plays on this wonderful slate. Like I said, there are 3 games on Saturday, and then there's the games on Saturday, or the Sunday and Monday games. So where are you at a quarterback this week? Let's kind of start at the top. Obviously, if you have any of these top guys, you're not sitting them. That is to be understood. Obviously, you're playing Lamar Jackson, you're playing Deshaun Watson, you're playing Russell Wilson, you're playing Patrick Mahomes. I think where you start to get into the question marks of guys where you maybe have some questions about would be this next tier, and that's like a Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston has been the fucking man the last 2 weeks, dropping 40 burgers each of the last 2 weeks. Are you playing him, though, now without Chris Godwin or Mike Evans? How much does he fall down for you against Houston, who's not a great secondary? It's a secondary that can certainly be toasted. Do you have interest in Jameis Winston? Are you still going to play him?
I mean, I think you have to, right? Like, unless you have somebody that is ranked higher in this, in this range, but it's hard to sit him just with the kind of quarterback that he is. He's going to go out there, he's going to throw it. Like you said, it's not a bad matchup. It's not like he's going up against a 49ers team or a tough Chicago defense or New England or something like that. And we saw it last week. Scotty Miller caught he had 1, I believe. Perriman obviously went off. Brait had it. So it's hard to sit him. If you, for some reason, were carrying 2 of the, let's say top 5 quarterbacks, then, you can use that as a tiebreaker. But this isn't an instance where I definitely wouldn't be streaming anybody over Jameis. The guys that were available, Trubisky, Fitzpatrick, Drew Lock. I'm not gonna stream any of those guys over Winston. So, it obviously is going to knock him down a little bit. But what did you say before we started recording, that he hasn't had fewer than 300 yards passing since like week 5 or something, which is just absolutely absurd. The interceptions are always going to be there no matter who is on the field or not on the field. So, that's always going to be a constant. But with his gunslinging mentality and, their running game basically isn't there. So I would still feel confident in firing him up, and I'm going to be doing so in a couple of my leagues. So maybe I'm also just trying to talk myself into it. So, and again, I think you feel pretty confident playing a Dak or even an Aaron Rodgers. I think you can certainly play. Kyler Murray is in a solid matchup against Seattle. Matt Ryan going against Jacksonville. Kirk Cousins going against Green Bay. And so past that, I think this is when you start to get into the real, like, if you had to stream a quarterback, if you were one of those people that were streaming all season, let's get into some of the streaming options here.
Ryan Tannehill, who has played very well since he has been inserted into the starting lineup. You have guys like Drew Lock, who is playing Detroit, where, again, this is a kind of a dart throw kind of play, but one that I think could pay off against a Detroit defense that has been just absolutely anemic. They have nothing to play for, nor do the Broncos, but I think this is another opportunity for Drew Lock to kind of put some solid tape down and, get an opportunity. He was completely horrible last week against the Chiefs, which is something that I called, and I felt like that was going to be an easy game for the Chiefs to kind of steamroll him. This was, on the road in Kansas City, but this week going on the road against Detroit, I just think this is a game where they can kind of get on top of this. And then you also have Gardner Minshew playing Atlanta. You have Andy Dalton going against Miami. Which of these guys from the Ryan Tannehills, the Drew Locks, Gardner Minshews, Andy Dalton would you consider playing this week?
For me, I'm probably looking at Mitch Trubisky. I know he's pretty widely available. He's getting KC. Basically, what I'm banking on there is we get some good old Blake Bortles garbage time production. Very similar to what we saw last week in their game against Green Bay. I mean, Trubisky still finished. It was over. I think it was like 349 and a touchdown, something like that. Again, you got to figure Casey's going to be able to put up some points on that defense the same way Green Bay was. And even if they don't jump out to some massive lead, they're still going to be leading that game. And we haven't seen too much out of that running game, even though that's Kansas City's weakness. So that I don't foresee Chicago coming out and just trying to pound the ball. I do like. I mean, it doesn't feel great, but I think Phillip Rivers. He might have been dropped. He might be another streaming option against Oakland. Surprised you didn't mention your boy Andy Dalton going up against Miami. I think that could be kind of like a streamer versus streamer there, with Fitzpatrick and Dalton facing off against one another.
Yeah, no, for sure. I will say this with Kansas City, they are a complete, they are a run funnel defense. They are actually 6th in pass DVOA, but they are 30th in run DVOA. So this is a tough one because Kansas City's defense, especially their secondary, has played very well with Travarius Ward, Rashad Breeland, and then in the back with the Honey Badger and their rookie Juan Thornhill. They've done a really good job of really containing passing offenses. It's really been the running game that's kind of gotten them, but they've even shored that up really recently. I mean, we haven't really seen teams that really run all over them in recent memory. So I don't know. Like, this is a tough one, even though it is on the road. Chicago is at home in this matchup, so I kind of get it. But I just think, man, like, I think this feels like a game where you could see the Chiefs kind of just wreck shop here. But we'll see what happens. Like, I get it, especially as a volume play, as a team that's going to be a positive game script in terms of passing and their passing offense. They're going to have to throw the ball to keep up with this offense. So I get that. So I don't hate it. And especially, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky has been running more. But if I had to, stream a quarterback this week, I think I would probably go to like a Drew Lock or a Gardner Minshew first, just because I think they're in better spots and better matchups. So, like with Drew Lock, like, again, like, you go back to last week, it certainly wasn't what you were looking for. But you go back to the games before that against Houston, where he had 309 and 3 touchdowns. And then even the game against the Chargers, where he didn't have really the passing yards, he only had 134, but he did have 2 passing touchdowns in that game. So I like Drew Lock here. And I think, with having Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant's emergence, I mean, I think I would rather play a Drew Lock. I think he's super, he's going to be a contrarian. I don't think many people are going to think about doing that. And I think if you're in the championship, like, you have to be pretty desperate to get to this point to have to play a Drew Lock, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, if by some stroke of God that you've made it to the fantasy playoffs and you're debating on playing Drew Lock in the ship, then hats off to, like, that's not a play I would feel super confident. I mean, the one thing that he does have going for him is with Cortland Sutton. The Lions have given up the most air yards so far this season, and the second highest defensive ADOT, just 0.1 yard behind the Miami Dolphins. They're giving up 10.1 as their ADOT. So that does obviously bode well for Cortland Sutton. Noah Fant, they just haven't used him downfield all that much, which I really don't get. A lot of his big plays have been, from screens, and there was one point, one of his games, he had like his ADOT was like 3 or something crazy. As far as streamers go, I would play Minshew over Drew Lock for sure. And I do just feel better about Trubisky. I totally get the strength of their defenses in the secondary, but A-Rob always seems to get his, and KC is a little more vulnerable over the middle to slot receivers as well. So that's why I'm also super high on Anthony Miller this week. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as the landscape goes for quarterbacks this week.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I will say this. I've seen it before. So like last year, I'm sure there was other people that are in this kind of situation where you're one of those teams that sort of back in, sneaks your way into the playoffs. You really probably shouldn't have been there. And then all of a sudden you have a couple of weeks where maybe the opponent you're playing isn't, just had a bad week, and you end up luck boxing your way into the championship. You're just kind of happy to be there because you really know you really shouldn't be. But like, this is one of those times, like, and this happened last year with in our home league, and a buddy of mine, was like, "Hey man, what should I do?" And I was like, "Dude, just go for the ceiling. Your team sucks. Like, you have no business being here, right?" And I remember last year, I can't remember who they were playing, but the Jets had a fantastic matchup week 16. I was like, pick up Sam Darnold, pick up Robbie Anderson. I think he may have had Robbie Anderson. I was like, and just play all the Jets. Just play all the Jets. And they went off that week, and he ended up winning the whole thing. Had no business winning. But that's what I would do if I was a team like that, where my team's just clearly outmatched in terms of just kind of on both sides. Like, that's what I would be looking to do, and playing some of these guys where on most weeks you wouldn't want to do it, but all you're trying to do is get a win for this 1 week. So, anyways, I think that's kind of where we're at with quarterback. Let's go ahead and answer this question. Matt, Will Fuller or Emmanuel Sanders? For me, it's Will Fuller.
Yeah, Will Fuller as well. The matchup, you couldn't ask for a better matchup, and that's kind of something, like I mentioned last week. As far as your studs go, there aren't too many that are in bad positions to where you're really debating on sitting them. Like I said, this matchup couldn't be any better with Sanders. Like, his usage has been so up in the air. Not that Fuller's hasn't, but this is a situation where Will Fuller came out of that game unscathed by all accounts, and they desperately need that deep downfield threat. So give me Fuller here, and the highest over under of the week. I think it at least opened at 53. I'm not sure where it is now or how much it's moved, but give me Fuller for sure.
I 100% agree with that. So. Either way. So again, let's go. We can jump over to running backs. If you want to see the full rankings, you can check them out on the fantasyauthority.com. They're right there on the homepage. You can check them out. If there's any other players you have questions about, we may not have answered. Jumping over to the running back position this week. Again, we don't really have to talk about Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley or Chris Carson, like all those guys. I will say, just like with a cliff note with Joe Mixon, like Joe Mixon has really balled. I think over the last 6 weeks, I think he leads the league in rushing. I believe I believe I'm correct on that. He has really kind of turned it on. Where after a really really rough first start of the season, and where I think a lot of people were dropping Joe Mixon, right? And now here we are. And he is, but they've kind of just committed themselves to him. They don't care if they're in it or they're out of it. It just hasn't been an issue for them. So they've just kind of fed him. And so, like with him, he's obviously a must start, especially in this matchup against the Dolphins this week. So, but I just wanted to mention him just because it's been a fun turnaround to see him actually start to produce. So. Didn't really help the Joe Mixon owners, who people probably took him in the second or third round, but he's starting to pay off now. Hopefully people didn't jump off too quickly. Zeke Elliott, you have Leonard Fournette against Atlanta, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, guys like that, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara. So let's kind of get into the ones that I think are, again, more question marks surrounding them. Guys like Todd Gurley, Philip Lindsay, Austin Eckler, who, I think is a must play, probably at the very least a flex. But, James Conner, who didn't really look great, but he did score a touchdown last week against the Bills. But I don't know if it's a better matchup against the Jets, because the Jets have been really strong against against them or against opposing running backs. And then you have guys like Kenyon Drake, Devonta Freeman. What are you doing with this tier of running backs?
Todd Gurley, I think if you're at this point and you have him, unless you have a better option, I think it's not a great matchup. Hopefully you do have a better option, but if you don't, you just got to ride him out at this point. His usage has really been ticking up over the past couple of weeks, and we're starting to see that, 2018, 2017 kind of level of usage from him, although the fantasy points haven't been there, obviously, to that level. Philip, dude, I was so high on Philip Lindsay last week. Got the weather, got the matchup against KC, and he just laid a dud. So, I'd be hesitant to go there. He's probably somebody you drafted, in the 5th, 6th round. So you should have somebody else that you can slot in ahead of him. Somebody I like this week in that kind of tier, Miles Sanders going up against Dallas. That's going to be a really big game for that division and the playoff picture. He finally went off last week. I think had over 120 yards rushing and a touchdown. I think he also caught another one. So that was good to see his breakout. Obviously in that matchup, obviously helped out there. David Montgomery, we kind of touched on a little bit. That's obviously where Kansas City's weakness is. So you would think that somebody like Matt Nagy would see that and be able to attack it, but I think KC is going to be able to put up enough points on them that, Montgomery maybe is a flex play, but he's disappointed as far as what a lot of people were expecting, especially myself. He was my favorite rookie running back coming into this year. Kenyon Drake, I like a lot going up against Seattle. He's kind of just pushed David Johnson completely to the side, and that's kind of been something that's been going on for the past couple of weeks. Marlon Mack, I think you're loading him up as an RB1 this week in that matchup, especially going up against Carolina, who's just been – I don't understand how they've been this bad, but Carolina has been completely awful against the run. So I think he's someone that if you've been able to get through with his injuries and kind of ineffectiveness from time to time, this is a week where I wouldn't even think about it. He would be locked in, like I said, as an RB1, probably your RB2 kind of in terms of pecking orders. So is there anybody that you're looking at in terms of someone that you're looking to sit, or someone you're just really not sure what to do with it out of this lower tier?
I think there's certainly guys that are going to be hard to trust, right? Like James Conner, for example, who does not get a great matchup against the Jets. They have been one of the best run defenses in the league this year. They're still number 2 in run DVOA on the season. And I don't know how much you can trust him in this matchup. Now, again, he was a guy that people drafted probably in the 2nd round, but we really haven't had a whole lot of him, so that you at this point probably have other options to go with than him. But I think the most interesting ones would be like the Kenyon Drakes, the Raheem Mosterts. Like, both of them have been really solid, especially over the last 4 weeks. You look at Mostert. He is actually number 3 over the last 4 weeks in fantasy points per touch. He's averaging 1.25 fantasy points per touch. This has been one of the most productive, run offenses in the league. And then you have Kenyon Drake, who some of it's, boomed up a little bit by the 4 touchdowns that he scored last week against, that he scored last week against the Browns, escaping me. But and he's averaged 0.97 fantasy points per touch as well. But this is a matchup where he gets a little bit harder. I believe it's on the road against Seattle. So, if I had to make an in which we have a question here, so that's perfect segue into that. Which who would you go with on either one of these? And I think I would probably lean towards Kenyon Drake just because he has a little bit more clear path to touches. We know he is the workhorse in this backfield, but it's tough because Raheem Mostert's been so productive and so efficient as a runner. It's hard to take him out. But this isn't, this is not a great matchup against the Rams run defense. The Rams are actually 6th in run DVOA on the season. So, I think I would lean a little bit more to him. Let's see. The Seahawks are 22nd, so it's definitely a much better matchup for Kenyon Drake. He's also involved in the passing game, and you're not really worried about someone like David Johnson taking away opportunities from him, or even a Chase Edmonds. It's kind of just been his backfield ever since they've made this trade for him. So I think I would probably go with a little bit more safer option here and go with Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, you touched on that perfectly. It's the matchup is in favor of Drake, and then the path to touches and the picture is just much clearer for Drake. Obviously, Raheem has been outplaying both Coleman and Breida, but I mean, even last week, I think both of those other two running backs both had 4 carries each, which, I mean, 4 carries doesn't sound like a lot, but add them up, that's 8 touches that's being taken away from Mostert. So I think the safer play is definitely with Drake going up against Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough.
Yeah, that they've been one of the most productive run games all year, and even going back to last year, that was something that surprised me when I was looking at run pass splits and that sort of thing. And San Francisco, let's not forget, they were not a good team last year because Jimmy G went down, and they didn't have much in terms of a passing game outside of Kittle. But even with as much as they trailed and as much as they lost, I think they were still top 5 in rush attempts or something. And obviously, like I said, they were effective with it. So, kind of fading a Shanahan run game doesn't feel great. But I think in this instance, you're better off rolling with Kenyon Drake, although it feels like a little point chasey. I'm not sure how confident we would be with saying Drake over Raheem. If it weren't for that massive game that he had last week. But I still think the process still lies with going with Kenyon Drake there.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a tough call, but I just think I would lean a little bit closer there. I guess I would ask, are there any other options or opportunities to be able to play both of them? Because I do think that sitting Mostert is a tough pill to swallow, especially as productive as he's been since kind of taking over as the lead back here in this offense. So, anyways, among other running backs, I guess that we could talk about here.
Would you be playing Patrick Laird if you picked him up? That kind of fantasy Twitter's everyone's favorite running back at this point going up against Cincinnati. Is he somebody you would think about throwing in your flex if you had to pick him up over the past couple of weeks?
Oh man, Patrick Laird has been hilarious to kind of monitor. The funniest part about him is that on fantasy Twitter has been a buzz about Patrick Laird, but it's just been hilarious because it's not even he's been productive. He had
that one game, right?
He had the one game where he totaled 82 yards. I guess he does. If you look at his numbers, week 11, he had 11.8 fantasy points. Week 13 against Philly, which is a pretty strong run defense, he had 14.8. Against the Jets, he had 12.2. And then last week against the Giants, he had 7.4. And if you look at him, he's had 15 targets over the last 3 weeks. So, it's just tough because, even his snap share is kind of what you're looking at. He played 58% of the snaps week 13, 84% against the Jets, and then 50% against the Giants. So, if you were desperate and just had to play somebody, I guess you could play Patrick Laird, but man, I don't feel fantastic about doing it. I have him ranked as, a low end flex option. I have him at running back 33 in PPR formats. I should clarify that. So, but I will say a couple running backs I think I'm a little bit higher on than maybe some other people are would be Tariq Cohen. I feel like this is definitely a Tariq Cohen type of game. and we haven't really seen a ton, of big explosive games like we've typically seen in the past from him. But this is one I feel like that they're going to probably try to use him in many different ways to get the ball in his hands against this Chiefs offense. I was actually surprised that they didn't. There was talk before this past week that they were going to flex this game out if the Bears lost against the Packers, and they end up holding this game and not moving it. They were going to flex it out with the Saints and Titans game, but they did not. They left it here, so that is a Sunday night game. But do you have any? I mean, would you play a guy like a Boston Scott if you absolutely had to in a PPR format? If you're desperate, if you lost Chris Godwin and Dalvin Cook or something like that, or you're just kind of like, needing something, and some of these other guys are gone, like, would you play some guys like this?
Just to touch on your Tariq Cohen call real quick, I do really like that. The Chiefs are giving up the most receiving yards to running backs so far, with only the Detroit Lions, not only because they're giving up the most, but the Lions and the Texans are behind them. Chiefs are giving up 805 receiving yards to go with 81 catches and 5 touchdowns. So I will give you a little pat on the back for that one. I do like that call. I mean, Boston Scott, like, man, I really hope you're not in the position where you need to roll somebody out like Boston Scott. I mean, I think he was still involved a little bit more than what I had thought. Whenever I looked at the, kind of just going through the box scores, obviously I knew Sanders had his big game. But Boston Scott still had 7 targets. He had 6 carries. So 13 touches is nothing to, look past. But I think I'd rather roll with somebody. Hopefully you have somebody like a James White. Doesn't look like a great matchup going up against Buffalo, but I mean, that definitely doesn't scream Sony Michel for that kind of game. Obviously he's going to be way more highly owned than Boston Scott would, but I mean, maybe kind of in that same area, just in terms of, being available on guys that you have or have not played. Man, that'd be a hard one for me to swallow. But is there anybody that you could think of that you'd be throwing in, kind of like what we were talking about with Rashad Perriman, just kind of being that YOLO, bite the bullet, hope for the best kind of play like that? Because I really don't get that vibe from Boston Scott. I mean, Dallas isn't a terrible matchup, but it's not a great matchup either. Is there somebody that you can kind of think of as a deep dart throw, just like you said, for the team that backed themselves in with a bunch of luck? Is there anybody that you can think of that might be widely available that someone could just either pick up and stream, or someone that's been, sitting on the depths of their bench all year and they get the one call for the fantasy glory?
Outside of the guys we already talked about, I guess maybe like if you wanted to go with like a Chris Thompson, with going up against the Giants. I don't hate that because Adrian Peterson is not typically used in the passing game, and obviously there's no Darius Guice who's out. So I think that is a direction you could go. Darwin Thompson, if we find out Damian Williams is out, but then I think there's a lot of people that may have dropped Damian Williams just because, the playoffs and everything else. But if he's able to return, it sounds like he might be back this week. He's certainly one that I think that you could probably go with if you had to, if he was playing. There's always a concern of re-injury. But, again, going against Chicago, I don't hate this, especially since they lost to Akeem Hicks. They've just not been as good against the run as they typically have been, or as they typically are. And let's face it, like LaShawn McCoy is kind of toast. They just continually basically give him about 20 to 30% of the snaps. And right now it's such a tough decision, really tough way. I don't know what they're going to do once Damian Williams is back, because I just can't see them having 4 running backs that are on their active roster. But that's kind of right now. It's been kind of a 3-head committee there with Darwin Thompson and Spencer Ware, who has played mostly on the pass catching work. I guess if Damian Williams wasn't, I guess if you absolutely had to, you could maybe play Spencer Ware if you had to, just because he's out there so much for the passing opportunities. But he's just not being targeted or really given much opportunity. So I think really if I was absolutely desperate, it probably would be like a Patrick Laird or Boston Scott, or maybe if Duke Johnson's available, or he's just been chilling on your bench against this Tampa Bay defense where, they are great against the run. But I think, utilizing him as a pass catcher, I think is a direction you could go. And then, again, it's the Mike Boone, just the DeAndre Washingtons, I think is the way I would go.
Yeah, I mean, if you need a super deep option where you're basically just kind of taking the tight end play and just crossing your fingers and hoping for a touchdown, if you really need somebody, maybe Jordan Wilkins. He has that matchup against Carolina, and the Panthers have given up 23 rushing touchdowns, and no other team in the NFL has given up more than 14. So, like I said, with Marlon Mack, the Panthers have just been getting absolutely decimated on the ground, giving up the second most rushing yards as well, and they're giving up the most half PPR fantasy points per game. So maybe it's just an instance where, Marlon Mack kind of rumbles down. They pull him out for a breather at the goal line, and, Wilkins can plunge in 2 touchdowns or something like that. But you have to be super desperate to be in that situation. But he's someone kind of like as a deep dart throw, cross your fingers and hope for the best kind of play.
Yeah, but let's at this point, let's hope that you're not in this position that you have to run one of these out there.
Correct.
So, okay. So a position where if I absolutely had to go to and I had to take some dart throws on, it would certainly be the wide receiver position that I would want to do this with, much deeper options here. So again, let's just get right past the most obvious of obvious plays here, and let's kind of get into more interesting spots. I think Terry McLaurin is certainly in play again. He had a great week last week. Now he gets the Giants without Janoris Jenkins, who is now gone from the team again. So I think for me, I have Janoris Jenkins as a top 15 option. I have him ranked at 14. Like I said, we've already kind of talked about it. I have Brashad Perriman at 19, AJ Brown at 20. Anthony Miller, I'm surprised that he was as widely available in a lot of leagues as he was. Like, he continually has put up great numbers over the last couple of weeks, especially with the absence of Taylor Gabriel. I think that is something to monitor because his splits with Taylor Gabriel and without are pretty stark. But you would think with as well as he's played that that wouldn't change a whole lot, and he would continue to see the heavy doses of targets. I don't know why it took them Taylor Gabriel getting knocked out for them to finally start giving him opportunity. He flashed last year, and I think that he was somebody that they should have went to far more, especially earlier in the year, and they just didn't. But
yeah, he's still available, and he's only 27% owned in Yahoo League. So Anthony Miller is widely available for you to pick him up and stream him this week.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, especially, this isn't like he just kind of had 1 week. Like, this has kind of been going on now for a few weeks now. So, I think one, what are you doing with Kenny Golladay? Like, we knew, like, once the Marvin Jones injury happened, like, okay, Kenny Golladay should just be hammered with targets. He should get like 15 targets here, right? Like, he's the alpha. But no. It was Danny Amendola, just slot city, just hitting Danny Amendola on the short underneath routes, and Kenny Golladay did absolutely nothing last week. And now he gets Denver. He's likely going to see Christopher Harris. Are you playing Kenny Golladay?
No, I don't think there's any way that you can. And I'm looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus ranks right now, and he's actually currently at 16th overall in half PPR, and I don't understand how he's that high. You talked about McLaurin. I would have McLaurin over him. Some other guys that are behind him: Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Rashad Perriman, Jarvis Landry. Like, all of those guys. I mean, Michael Gallup. That's been my dude all year. He's down at 23 in the consensus ranks. Has the matchup against Philly. I would very easily play Gallup over Kenny G if that's a decision that you were faced with. I mean, even like a Mike Williams going up against Oakland. So I'm surprised that he is ranked as high as he is. It looks like he's had a high rank of 14 and a low rank of 23 as it sits right now. So Galladay, there's no way that you can. They're on the road, bad matchup, and outside of that first half on Thanksgiving, I mean, I really don't think he's done anything since that first half. So he should be strictly on your bench this championship week. I mean, like, would you play Darius Slayton or Kenny G?
Slayton. I mean, last week was a nuts matchup going against Tampa Bay, right? Like, Tampa Bay's secondary is horrendous. They've hammered with injuries, and he went, 42 yards? Or no, 44 yards. Yeah. I mean, it's on 3 receptions, 7.4 fantasy points. Like, I don't know. Like, I think at this point, David Blau is an absolute bum. I wish Jeff Driscoll could have remained the starter there in Detroit, but it is what it is. So right now, like, I just think I would have a hard time trusting Kenny Galladay out there. I actually have Kenny Galladay much lower than that. I have him at 32. So I kind of have him at that low end wide receiver 3. I have Slayton ranked ahead of him. I have Tyler Boyd ranked ahead of him. You know, like, where I start getting into question marks for me would be like the Odell Beckham range, who that is a dumpster fire in itself. It sounds like he could be out, but like you start getting into the guys that like where I think there's a lot of question marks or dart throw type of plays or guys that I would look to pick up. One would be Greg Ward, who had a really solid game last week for the Eagles and, you know, gets the Cowboys this week, and basically the game that is basically just kind of decides the division here a little bit. But with all the injuries that they have on that secondary, they're going to have to do something. So last week he had 9 targets, 7 receptions, 61 yards, and the late touchdown score there. He's playing over the last 2 weeks. He's played 89 and 83% of the snaps. He's running a ton of routes, 41 and 32 routes ran. You know, a 19.1 fantasy points last week. You know, it may be a little bit chasing, but against Dallas, that secondary doesn't scare me all that much. And so I think Greg Ward is actually in play as kind of a low end, you know, flex option this week, and somebody that I have some interest in. And then we'll have to see what happens with, you know, as long as DJ Chark comes back. I still think Chris Conley against Atlanta. There, I think Chris Conley, who scored a couple touchdowns last week, is a guy that I really like. And then Justin Watson, we've sort of talked about last week, a freak athlete, really high spark score. I think a lot of people thought last week was kind of the week we all got on board with it, and it didn't work out. Ended up being all about Rashad Perriman. But now with no Chris Godwin, they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. They also don't have Scotty Miller, like we already talked about. I think Justin Watson, as kind of a dart throw play, is also at least interesting. You know, some other options here, if you kind of look at it, James Washington has been interesting over the last 4 weeks. He is third in weighted opportunity rating, which is basically combining market share of air yards and total air yards over the last 4 weeks, and he is third in that in weighted opportunity rating. I just think there's a lot to like there against the Jets. This is again a kind of a must-win game for them. I don't have a ton of confidence in Delvin Hodges, but I think if I had to play James Washington or even a Deontay Johnson, it's kind of like a late round as a flyer. I think you could do that. You know, some other guys like Larry Fitzgerald against Seattle, I think is in play if you kind of needed it, something like that. You know, or a McCole Hardman who's always there to go off, or even a Traquan Smith. Is there anybody, you know, kind of in this YOLO range that you would want to play?
Yeah, just to touch on your Greg Ward call, he has led the receivers and targets over the past 2 weeks, and I think he's only been behind Zach Ertz, just in general for overall targets. So I mean, he's definitely sneakily in play, and I can't imagine he's owned in more than, you know, carries more than like a 2 to 5% ownership across, you know, most redraft leagues. Chris Conley, that is my boy. He is, like you said, I think he's in play even if Chark comes back. James Washington, you mentioned his Whopper. He is third in market share of air yards over the past 3 weeks. So, I mean, you can also look to him. I think even if Juju comes back, the matchup against the Jets, like they've been decimated by injuries in their secondary, so he is clearly in play. I think if you wanted to go a little deeper than that, like you mentioned, Amendola, I wouldn't feel great about him. That'd be somebody that I would only play in like a full PPR kind of league and hope that he just eats up, has basically an A dot of 4 and just eats up a bunch of targets underneath going up against Denver. Randall Cobb, going up against Philly, I think that, that's another matchup that you can do. We touched on, Will Fuller with one of our questions earlier. Kenny Stills could definitely be in play. Just, again, with that matchup going against Tampa Bay, Deshaun Watson at quarterback, obviously, you could always go there and, kind of just, I wouldn't bank on the 2 touchdowns he had again, but, we were talking about that's the Houston offense needs that deep threat. So maybe if Fuller is, kind of closer to Fuller, to full health with that hamstring injury, if he can kind of take the top off, if Hopkins gets a little extra attention, that should leave Stills kind of open in the middle, just dragging across the middle of the field. A real YOLO one, John Ross going up against Miami. He was actually quietly having a pretty nice start to his season before I think shoulder injury, I believe, or chest or clavicle, something like that, put him on IR. So going up against Miami, like those are the kind of things that you should be looking at if you're looking at these deeper kind of dart throw plays. Is just look directly to the matchup, and Miami that doesn't get much better than that. Kelvin Harmon has been seeing some increased usage. I just saw Trey Quinn was put on IR. I think Richardson is still banged up. So Kelvin Harmon getting the Giants. Like, again, just look at the matchup, and they're now without Janoris Jenkins, like you mentioned earlier. So that's another place you can go. And if you like Drew Lock, what do you think about somebody like Tim Patrick going up against Detroit? Is he somebody that, going super deep here? Is he someone you would even think about, like if you were, maybe you're in like a 14 or a 16 team league, or, a bunch of different flex positions that you're rolling out. Maybe you're just in a deeper league in general. Any thoughts on Tim Patrick with your Drew Lock call for the week? I mean, there are definitely guys that I would play ahead of him, but just as far as, a super deep dart through kind of a play.
I think I would rather consider someone like Deshaun Hamilton, to be honest with you. If you look at Hamilton last week, he actually played 87% of the snaps. He ran 34 routes, which is the most he's run all year, with the exception of week 2, where he ran 37. It's the most targets he's received all year. He had 9 targets, 1 red zone target. Now, like I said, Drew Lock was awful last week, and they had to throw the ball, where he had 2 receptions for 13 yards, which is nothing to write home about. But I do think that there's at least some intrigue here with him in this matchup against where he's not going to be seeing Darius Slay because he plays primarily in the slot. Again, I can't believe we're talking about going this deep, but like if you're in a super deep league and you're just desperate and you're a Chris, I guess a Chris Godwin owner, and you lost him, and now, and you're in the fantasy playoffs, you're in the championship week, and, you're in that super 14, 16 team league where you're just absolutely desperate for a wide receiver, and maybe you don't have anybody else, or you have some terrible matchups or whatever, whatever's going on. Like if you were down here, like I would probably try to get Greg Ward, but if I couldn't, then, maybe a Deshaun Hamilton, I guess that would be the most YOLO play there is, just because he really hasn't done a whole lot this year. The most he scored is 8.7 fantasy points going all the way back to week 4 against the Jaguars. So He's only topped over 50 yards once, and that was in that one game. Other than that, he's been 40 and under every single game. So, but with that uptick in targets, I think that at least has some intrigue. And then the more he is still seeing heavy snaps as well. 71, 58, 74, and 87% of the snaps the last 4 weeks as well. So,
what would you be doing with somebody like a John Brown with the matchup that he has with New England? Somebody that has been super solid and consistent over the course of the past 15 weeks. Is he somebody that you would think about sitting in this matchup? Like if you had somebody who was, let's say on an equal level in terms of a play for this week.
Yeah. I don't really want any. I wouldn't want any of that. I would rather play Cole Beasley or have Cole Beasley or something like that. I think he's in a better spot than what he's going to – like John Brown this is a terrible spot for him. He's likely going to see a lot of Stephon Gilmore, and that is not a spot I want, especially with Josh Allen. So, yeah, I think you can sit him. Like I said, Kenny Golladay is certainly somebody you can sit. Odell Beckham, I think, is somebody that you should be really strongly considering not playing. I currently have John Brown ranked at 43 right now, so outside of a flex option or a wide receiver 4. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where I stand with them. I just don't think this is a great week to play any of them. Like I said, Kenny Golladay, Odell has been anemic as well, and then a John Brown, I just can't do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. He was somebody that, as I was scrolling through, kind of looking at maybe like one of the bigger names where you're debating on sitting him. Like San Francisco doesn't look like a great matchup for the Rams, but you'd already mentioned that secondary is pretty banged up. Julian Edelman obviously is going to be in the slot against Buffalo, so he'll avoid Tre'Davious White. So, other than that, like Casey at Chicago, obviously you're not fading any of the Kansas City pieces that have gotten you to this point. And just a quickly note, week 4, Bills play New England. John Brown had 11 targets and went 5 for 69. So still had a solid floor, but hopefully you have something a little bit better where you feel more strong about that matchup. If you were desperate, what would you be doing with T.Y. Hilton this week? Obviously came back, played a little bit, led the team in targets, and that absolute smackdown against New Orleans. Didn't do a lot with those targets, but did lead the team with 9 and reportedly no setbacks or anything like that after the game.
I don't mind it. I don't think it's a terrible play. I have him as a wide receiver 3, so I'm playing him. I think one that we didn't really talk about though, I think is Adam Thielen, who I think some people would be pretty nervous with him. He only ran 17 routes, only targeted 3 times. Now this was kind of a route. It was a tougher matchup against Casey Hayward. Only played 48% of the snaps. I think a lot of people would be nervous to roll him out of here again this week. But, kind of listening to Dr. Chow, who does an excellent job with, talking about all the injuries and everything else that occur. He said he was he said that he figured that this is how the Vikings were going to play him and only play in very limited snaps and weren't going to kind of go out there. But he did say that he felt like this week he'd be full go in this matchup against the Packers and that he'll probably get, his full allotment of snaps or get back up to that 80-90% of snap share. So, but, without knowing that for sure, like where are you? Do you feel confident in playing an Adam Thielen this week?
Confident? Absolutely not. Hamstring injuries, especially for the position like wide receiver, like that's something that's always going to scare me away. But Green Bay, that matchup would have looked a lot worse at the beginning of the year. They've kind of shown some chinks in their armor as of late over the past couple of weeks. So if you made it this far, you obviously went through that big stretch without Thielen. So hopefully you have somebody who, you can rely on a little bit more. So as far as feeling confident with Thielen, like absolutely not. But if you don't have any better options, like I don't think it's as scary as it would have appeared, 2 or 3 weeks ago. If you're saying that, Dr. Chow kind of expected this in terms of, kind of letting him break in. Obviously, they didn't need him in that game last week where they were just up big on the Chargers the whole game and kind of just controlled that from beginning to end. So confident, no, but I mean, if you have no better choice, I don't think it's. I wouldn't be going too deep into the waiver wire to find somebody to play over Thielen. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I saw him as a wide receiver too this week, so I think he's fine to play. I feel pretty good about rolling him out there. They said that they weren't going to bring him back this time until he was 100%, and which is why it's taken this long for him to come back. I mean, he hadn't played since 2 snaps or 3 snaps in week 9. So, yeah, I feel pretty confident with him, and I think it was just kind of easing him back in last week, and then they got up pretty quickly against the Chargers and didn't really have to play him anymore. So, let's go ahead and jump over to tight end again. Not going to go super in depth on guys like Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz or George Kittle. I will say Tyler Higbee, we kind of got on him early before he really had this breakout. And I mean, he has been nothing but gold. I think he has 3 straight games of over 100 yards receiving. So even against San Francisco, he's kind of an auto lock at this point. It will be somewhat something to monitor with Gerald Everett if he's back and what they're going to do. But it's hard for me to fathom that they would sit Tyler or start to reduce Tyler Higbee's snaps as well as he's played. Like that dude is bald. Since kind of getting all the opportunities there for the Rams. Hunter Henry, Darren Waller, Austin Hooper, Jared Cook, Mark Andrews, you're starting them. We don't have to have a conversation about it. If you have them, you're playing them. They're all in pretty decent matchups. There's none that really I don't know about that one. I feel pretty good about all of them. Again, I have Noah Fant at tight end as a tight end 1 this week at number 11 against Detroit. OJ Howard, I could probably make a case to move him up even higher with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and all these guys out. This could be the kind of the big OJ Howard week that we've all been sort of waiting for. But I think a stat line of 5 for 60 and a touchdown is certainly in the realm of possibility for him against Houston. And then you have Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert. We'll see what happens with Evan Ingram.
I think Ingram has been put on IR. So
yeah, you're right. That's why I stopped. So I was like, wait. So no, not with Evan Ingram, but Jacob Hollister, Ian Thomas, guys like that. Who out of this group are you most excited about? And if you had to rank Fant, Howard, Gesicki, and Thomas, how would you rank them?
I think you got to go directly to the flow chart. Jacob Hollister, he's definitely widely available, and he gets Arizona. And something that we neglected to mention, maybe because it was a little too hard for you. You couldn't get through Chris Godwin and this other player, but your boy Josh Gordon, obviously suspended indefinitely again. So I understand why we skipped over that. That just would have been too painful for you to mention both of those guys in one breath. So maybe that opens up a little bit more for Hollister against Arizona. But as far as those other guys go, I'm going to put Howard at the top. He wasn't as involved as we would think with him leading the team in targets. I still think he had a reduced snap share, and as far as routes run, it wasn't as high as I think he had 9 targets, as high as I would suggest. But the matchup, the injuries, Howard would be first. Noah Fant, he's been banged up and he's been playing through a bunch of his injuries. I think it's been foot, shoulder, and hip. Again, going up against Detroit, that's obviously not going to scare you. So those would be my first 2, and then I'm probably going to go Jonnu Smith third, and then throw in Gesicki there in 4th. And then I would have Ian Thomas actually over those last two. So Howard, Fant, Ian Thomas would be my top three.
It should be mentioned with Ian Thomas though that Greg Olson cleared the concussion protocol and is expected to return this week. Which, yeah, if you have to get your 36-year-old or however the hell old he is, aging tight end who's likely to retire back into your lineup, you just have to do it right instead of giving a young player like Ian Thomas more opportunity and to get more reps in. So you just have to do it. You have to get Greg Olson back in there. So I guess we'll have to see how that turns out for them, especially with Will Grier back. Because one thing to mention with Will Grier now taking over is what we typically see. One, we don't have to worry that Christian McCaffrey's going to get 1,000 targets in this game, but young rookie quarterbacks tend to check down quite a bit and tend to look for their tight end as kind of a security blanket. So it's not crazy to say that if Greg Olson comes back and he's the one that starts, that he sees more targets than you typically would. And he's coming off a concussion, which is, something that obviously could happen again, especially coming off of it. But it's not like it's a leg injury or a knee injury or a hand or something like that where he could quickly re-injure it and exit. So, Greg Olson could see 8 to 10 targets. So, something like this and a game where, with Will Grier kind of looking to check down and kind of get the ball out of his hand. So, yeah, I mean, it sucks for Ian Thomas, but if we get the word that Ian Thomas is going to remain the starter and Greg Olson is just going to kind of play limited snaps, then Ian Thomas is certainly I would want to go back there. But right now, it's hard to have him ahead of them. I have guys like Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant, Jacob Hollister, Mike Gesicki, all ahead of him.
Yeah, for sure. So someone that I would like to believe in more this week, if you're looking at the streamer level kind of area, would be Jonnu going up against New Orleans. We were already talking about Lattimore being plastered to AJ Brown and the addition of Janoris Jenkins, depending on how much he plays. But New Orleans is giving up the 10th fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. And obviously Jonnu Smith's involvement has been all over the board over the past several weeks with Ryan Tannehill under center. So if for some reason all those guys are already picked up, I mean, you could do worse than Jonnu Smith, but it's not as good as it would appear, especially with the strength of that defense being with Marshawn. So, I mean, I would still have all those other guys ahead of him. I think I'd rather take a swing on Cameron Brate over somebody like Jonnu Smith this week.
Yeah. So I do have to mention though, my main man, Mr. Dan Arnold did haul in a touchdown last week. That was fun for the Arizona Cardinals. So not that matters because you're not playing Dan Arnold, who won 5 total routes and had 1 target, red zone touchdown. But I think he's at least an intriguing prospect for next season. Depending on what Arizona does at the tight end, right? They have Charles Clay and much old men, but Dan Arnold was always somebody that even intrigued me back, when he was with the Saints, but it was kind of a crowded situation with Jared Cook and Josh Hill, so he was always kind of the third man. But I mean, he is still only 24 years old. He has an upper percentile in terms of, he has a 78th percentile rate of 4.68 40-yard dash, but his burst score is 97th percentile, a 94th percentile agility score with a 95th percentile catch radius. Like, there's a lot to like here. I mean, he is I think that somebody that if they kind of hold on to and kind of utilize next year, I think that he's at least someone to kind of watch heading into next year, depending on what Arizona does with this offense and tight end. So shout out Dan Arnold. We'll never forget you. And just going back to the DFS days of last year where he won us a lot of money. Anyways, do you have anything else you kind of want to hit on for this week 16 sort of championship week?
I don't think so, man. Just wishing everybody the best of luck in these matchups and thank you guys. If you're listening now, hopefully that means you've been listening all year long. I know we had a nice shout out on Twitter from someone, so we definitely appreciate that, and all you guys for hanging with us all year and letting us get you to this point. Hopefully we've provided you guys some value in terms of, start sit decisions and everything else like that, and maybe hit you with some nice entertainment value. Thinking back to I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point with your little shimmy. If you weren't watching on, there it is. You need to figure out a way to patent a dance move, and that's the first one we need to patent. Not the moonwalk. I mean, nothing like the Jabberwockies. We need the steel shimmy to be the first patented, copywritten dance move.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's what I'll say is it's a shame that the season's over, or at least fantasy season's over. It's something we talk about all year. We can't wait. We can't wait. Look forward to it. Please hurry up and get here. And then it zooms by and it's over, because that's where we're at now. We are, the last week, right? I guess it's cool that it happened before Christmas, and so we'll get all that out of the way. You'll get a nice early Christmas present if you win the championship. And for a lot of leagues, even if you win second place, not that this is nice, but a lot of leagues have still decent payout for second place. So at least you won something. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy year. We should say that every year. There's so much variance, and there's so many different things that happen. If you would have told me that David Johnson would be healthy for like a 4-week period and he would be absolutely useless and would not even get any opportunities, I would have fucking punch you in the throat for lying. But that is what's happened. Guys like David Johnson has become just an absolute nobody, and who's likely going to get traded. We've seen, there'll be a pretty good debate next year heading into, what to do with these top guys, especially. I mean, you had Saquon Barkley, who struggled for a lot this year and got hurt.
Kamara.
It hasn't been that great. Kamara hasn't been great. There's a serious debate to have about Michael Thomas, and should he be the number 2 pick off the board? People are going to say, no, it's a running back. But we say it every year. Running backs are very volatile. And multiple guys who are being taken in the first round of fantasy drafts are going to bust in terms of the running back position. Wide receivers give you a little bit more stability. And a guy like Michael Thomas, who has been right up there with Christian McCaffrey, not as good, not as high of a ceiling as obviously as Christian McCaffrey has. Christian McCaffrey's on a historic pace in terms of what we see in fantasy football. But Michael Thomas has been, the most reliable wide receiver all year, and it's not close. And he's done it without a great quarterback in Drew Brees. Whenever they had Teddy Bridgewater, he was still putting up big numbers. So, I think there's going to be a lot of debate about that next year. There's going to be a lot of different movement among quarterbacks and situations like that. So, I'm looking forward to next year. I think next week we'll kind of just do a wrap-up show of kind of just looking back at everything, kind of maybe taking a look forward. If you play in keeper leagues, I think this will be a good opportunity to kind of, listen. Best ball is certainly going to be starting up here in the next, 2 months. Actually, most of my best ball leagues that I'm in first and 3 and second and 4 of them. And the ones that I'm doing the best in are all the ones that I did in the early season of February and March, because you can really get an edge on people in best ball because so many people are living off recency bias of the season that just happened and not trying to be forward thinking, and they're still living off what just happened in the fantasy season. So I highly recommend that. So I think next week will be a lot of fun. We'll just kind of do some recap and have some fun and cut up. And then, heading into the off season, we're going to be doing a lot of dynasty content or rookie content. So if you're somebody who wants to, learn about all these rookies, if you haven't been following it as close as some of these dynasty heads have, where they have, routinely masturbated every week over every one of these guys and kind of overanalyze some of these dudes, DeAndre Swift or all these dudes that people have gotten really excited about, that it's about to really take over, especially hand size Twitter, I guess, will be back, and all that stuff that we get to discuss. But it'll be a lot of fun kind of digging into some of these rookies, and then also covering free agency and the NFL draft leading up to that. So we do have a lot of content that we're going to be looking to do. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for that portion of it. Like Dynasty is where my heart is, so definitely looking forward to really diving in, because obviously with everything we've been doing at the Fantasy Authority, haven't been able to dive in too much. I've been dipping my toes, but over these next couple of weeks, I'm really going to dive in, and I'm excited to just kind of share what I'm learning and how I'm feeling about some of these guys as everything goes on. We're going to have the Senior Bowl and and everything like that. So I'm really excited about that, and then the potentially doing the live draft show, which will be a lot of fun if we end up going through with that, and then kind of going off that. If any of you listeners are interested in writing any kind of Dynasty content, the DMs are open, and we're definitely looking to bring on some Dynasty writers to help flood Twitter with all the rankings and mock drafts that you can't get away from between January and in April. So definitely slide in, let us know if you're interested, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we'll have to get some guests on. For some Dynasty guys and stuff like that on. Maybe I'll go into the old Rolodex and hit up like guys like Travis May, who are former TFA guys, or Justin McCaslin, people like that, and see if they want to hop on and tell me why Dynasty is so great and try to convince me that Dynasty is the best format. But it'll be a lot of fun. Anyways, I hope everybody has a great week 16. I hope everybody has a great Christmas that's coming up. If we don't get to talk to you before then, I guess we'll have to see how that's going to work out, because I do believe that Christmas Eve is on Tuesday, which is our normal recording day. So that might be a little tough to record on Christmas Eve. I don't know how our families are going to feel about us trying to record on Christmas Eve. So we may have to come up with a different strategy or a different plan there on that. On how we're going to get some that out. But again, it's not going to be super pressing, because we're not going to sit here and break down week 17, because it's foolhardy and a fool's errand, if you will. So again, we really appreciate everybody sticking with us this year. We have a lot of fun stuff coming, and I think we're only going to get better, and things are only going to progress. We got a lot of good ideas of heading into the off season of how we're going to get better. So again, hit that like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're in the chat, or if you on your podcast software, we really appreciate any sort of feedback you may have for us, things we can improve, things we can fix, whatever. We appreciate all that, and that is something that we take to heart. We actually listen to every comment and everything that you guys have to say, because this is, in fact, your show. Without it, we wouldn't do it. I guess we would just be talking into the nothingness that is our microphone. So until next week, again, have a great holiday, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever it is that you celebrate. I hope you have a fantastic week, and hopefully you get that championship and bring it back to the house. All right, have a great week. Peace.